Hey friends, Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever, and today we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. We're going to be following up from our previous video that was all about the new Costco exclusive Batmobile. If you watched that previous video, you know that you're getting an incredible value for that $20 Batmobile. Not only do you get a giant Batman figure you can give to some kid, but you also get a really good base Batmobile for some kind of custom project or something that maybe for your Mezco figures or McFarlane or even Mattel figures. There's a lot of different options, and just want to show you a very basic tutorial of how you too can, in no time at all, just one evening, get your Batmobile looking up to snuff with the very best of your Mezco and McFarlane collection. Before going any further, if you've not checked out our previous review, then please do so at this time. You'll find the link in the description below. So let's begin by talking about some very basic and cheap things that you will need to get started. First off, this was literally the cheapest powder application brush I could find, but this was like $3. Sticking with the theme of extremely cheap brushes, this is, I believe, a dollar store brush. It's just a little more thick on one end. It kind of has that just straight cut off. You're going to need this for some of your work. You'll also need just a few other little brushes, maybe in one of those multi-packs you can get at Walmart for $2 or $3. We're using only the cheapest of the cheap. Next, we're going to need just a little Phillips screwdriver to remove the canopy later. We will need a little bit of painter's tape, and you can get this, much smaller rolls of it too, for practically nothing, just a couple of bucks. Next up, you'll just want a little basic array of little containers of paint. Just a regular acrylic will work. It does not have to be anything fancy. You'll want some nicer quality paints for what we're going to use for most of the Batmobile. Now, anything would probably work in the acrylic range, but I really love using the Games Workshop Citadel paints. And these are great. We're going to be mostly using this one, the Citadel Layer Steel, and the Citadel Base Abaddon Black. So these are the two that I would suggest for this particular project. And you won't need very much of either of them, so you can get these tiny little containers of them. You will need some Rust-Oleum. Now, this stuff works wonders with the kind of hard plastic, especially with toys. Rust-Oleum, 2x Ultra Cover, matte clear, and you want to get the one that says bonds to plastic, because boy does it ever work, and you're really going to want this for the final step. One final thing you'll probably be needing is some isopropyl alcohol. It's just a Walmart brand, 91% is fine. Any kind of alcohol or anything like that will work just for some removal and some cleanup. So without further ado, let's talk about exactly what we did. So first off, you can see in some of the photos I'm providing, the Batmobile itself is just black plastic. There really isn't, well, any paint work to speak of. Everything is just different colors of plastic and different types of plastic just combined together. There is no actual paint on there, so you are dealing with something that pretty much is almost quite literally a blank canvas to start with. Once you get a good gauge of what you're going to do with the Batmobile, what I thought of as I was looking through it was that it needed a whole lot of light dry brushing of silver. The thing that I would suggest that you use is your powder brush, and you will of course want to use the Citadel silver for this. I went through, and this was probably the longest part of the project. You're just going to want to get as little paint on here as possible. And as a matter of fact, I'll usually take a paper towel, which you also need for this project, and I'll get some of the excess off, and then I'll go through and I will try to hit all of the high points on the top of the Batmobile and all the sides. And you'll want to particularly focus on any edges. Now, what I always try to keep in mind as I was brushing it onto the Batmobile was I wanted to be a little heavier with this on places that I thought just the aerodynamic nature of a car where the wind would just blow over that part, or there would maybe be debris, or Batman would run into trouble. So that meant any kind of high edge, those were the places that I really laid this on with. I went through and just gave a very generous amount everywhere I went. Now, it's possible that you may mess up a couple of times or go overboard. In that case, you have probably about a 5-second window to just take your finger and just smear it off. By the time I was done, I had silver all over my hands. And a lot of the times what I would end up doing is I would take a paper towel, just dab a little alcohol on there, not very much. And if I really needed to clean something up, that alcohol would usually just erode that paint right off, and with no damage, of course, to the very sturdy plastic of the Batmobile underneath. but I kind of picked a direction to kind of go back with. And that's what you'll want to also do with this brush. You're just going to want to stroke backwards with it, because I figure that with the wind going this way and debris going this way, any kind of projectiles, that everything should be worn kind of in that direction. I even did a little bit to the canopy up here, so that was part of the whole process. Now, as you can see by the pictures, you're going to end up with a very silver looking Batmobile. Now here's a picture of it half and half, so you can kind of see just compared to the actual base Batmobile how it's going to be looking. As a matter of fact, you may get a little worried once you see it and think, oh no, I've kind of went overboard with this. You haven't yet, you haven't, because there is another pretty big step that we're going to get into a little bit later. Next up, after you do that, you will want to take your flat brush, that just kind of looks like this right here, and this is where you're going to get in to doing some of the more solid silver details. This is also where you can take corners that maybe didn't quite pick up enough of the silver paint and add that to it. If you want more of an extreme silver in some areas, I would just get corners, and that's all I would do in one pass. I would get this entire corner, this right here, any place where there was a hard edge, right over top of the ram right there, got all of that. Any place that I could find that needed a little something. This is also where I would add really large blemishes of silver, like this part right here, and even this area right here on the canopy. These silver pipes, these exhaust pipes, I got a very solid base of silver, very solid right on there. It doesn't actually take a whole lot of paint, and if you overdo it, then it's more likely to peel off with some use. And that's gonna happen, by the way, as you handle this thing and you get it at different angles to paint it. So be prepared for that. Just know that you can go in and repaint it and touch it up. It doesn't have to look perfect, because that's the beauty of this project. The Batmobile is already really beat up and worn. If Batman was actually using it, if it was realistic at all, then it's already going to have that kind of wear. The next area that I really focused on was doing these side panels. And it kind of gave me that spirit of the animated series Batmobile, so I wanted to get some silver on there. And here's the trick. If you want it to have this nice worn look, then put very little silver paint on this brush right here, very little, and just go through and apply it that way. And what you're going to find is it does the work for you, because there's already black showing through because you didn't use a whole lot, and that does a whole lot of the work. And there's another step later, but that does a whole lot of the work. The next area that we really focused in was these vents right here. And so I just applied silver paint. This is already just about the right width for that. We did the same thing to the other side. Next thing I did was get a pretty solid coating of silver on the internal hubcaps right there. And on the back, I took the main exhaust pipe and totally covered it in silver. And of course, did a lot of the same detailing to the back. One thing I also did was I went in and I painted each individual little bolt. And it doesn't take very much at all. You just use one of your smaller brushes, put a little bit of that silver Citadel paint on there, and just tap on each one of those and get each one of the bolts, and it gives it a lot more detail, and it gives it kind of a neat sort of heavy metal look. So that was a lot of fun. I took one of my very smallest brushes, and this just came out of one of those little packs you can get at Walmart or a craft store. And I actually went in, I painted in this little hubcap right here, the Bat logo. And here's the thing, when you do this and there's red paint on your brush, you're gonna get the red paint all over the silver area too. And guess what? That is perfectly okay, because not only can you kind of wipe it back off of it with your thumb, and most of it will come off, but you can just go back in, let it dry for a second, and you'll just end up hitting it again with a little bit more of that silver. And because the red bat symbol is so recessed back in there, you're not going to get any of the silver on it. So it is extremely easy to touch up and make it look very clean. That's very deep in there. So it ends up looking very nice, very professional, and you really didn't have to have any kind of disciplined paint work to get it to look like that. I wanted this to have some kind of tip of the hat to the 66 Batmobile, and I decided that was the way I was going to do it, by having the red Bat logos on there. The next area I use the red on are the tail lights in the back. And so what you'll find is this is some of the slickest area of plastic on the entire piece. This is extremely difficult to get paint to stick to. There are a few different solutions to this problem, and I'm going to share just a few of them with you that you could possibly do. Number one, you could put some kind of primer on there, which would work very well. So that would probably actually be the best option. Solution number two, you could probably pretty easily sand those interior areas. And that would also work very well, I think, for this. Or you can go for the method that would require the least amount of prep, but it might be the most difficult to make work, and that's to continue to layer on paint. Now, as you let the paint dry, you'll have to give it a little time, of course, and then you'll come back and just add another layer of red. And eventually, you'll notice that the paint begins to stick because there is a base layer of paint in there. Here's the great part. It goes really high up in here, but if you mess up and get a little paint on the interior part, no one will really notice because you can't really see that in there. The other solution that you have is to just paint these as the tail lights. I've seen some people do that. You can definitely do that, but for me, I don't know. It almost looks like an armor panel here of some kind, and I could be totally wrong. But for me, I wanted it to have the Batman the Animated Series look of the triangular taillights, and I just thought this was a neat opportunity to combine it with this. You never know, I may end up doing something a little different down the line, but I really like how that looks from the back. I think it has kind of a neat shape to it. If you want to make things a little easier before you get too crazy, you might just want to go ahead and take your Phillips head screwdriver and just loosen these 3 screws right here, and this will pop right out. The canopy isn't glued in any way, the orange part, transparent part, and if you take this out, that means that you'll have a much easier time when it comes to detailing that canopy. You won't have to worry about getting paint on there. But if you were impatient like me and you just wanted to get that part done, and I didn't take out that part until later, then it's very easy to take your isopropyl alcohol and just wipe off any excess paint that got on there. It won't damage it at all. It really does help to be able to get close because I wanted that kind of wear to go right up to the glass. Now, I know that some people get fancy with their black wash, but the truth is that once you're done with the silver detailing, you're going to have a very silver looking Batmobile. As a matter of fact, it kind of reminded me of the Legends of Batman Batmobile from Kenner back in like 95, 94. And I thought, no, I don't want the Batmobile to look silver. And it was really worrying me. I thought maybe I had kind of went too far, but this is one thing in your arsenal that's going to help knock that silver down a little bit. Here's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to do a kind of 1-to-1 ratio of paint to water in a cup. And for this, yes, I know it's a DC project, but I always use my old reliable Dr. Doom mug that was, I think it's like from 97 or something, so it's been around a while. I just pour it in, put some black paint in there with water, mix it up, and I put just a little bit of dishwashing liquid. It hardly takes any. This is just to make it a little more, to where it kind of glides over surfaces. It doesn't stick directly. I would put very, very little if I were you. I took my larger brush right here, which is just kind of a big brush, just to get a lot applied at once. And I very generously started applying that black wash over different parts of it. Now, this does not account for most of the black that you're seeing. Instead, this was mostly a way to knock down the really silver parts like this. You see how it settled into the grooves in some of those areas? Same for over here, how it settled into those grooves. This is not going to be what's going to restore your surface to this black look that you're seeing right now. It is going to be the thing that settles into different grooves and gives it a little more detail, like on these pipes over here. It can also help with your wheel wells just a little bit, give them a little more authenticity. And it can also knock down the silver just a little bit that's on that tailpipe. So that's an important step that you can take to do that. Once that's done though, what I did was I started taking my another larger brush that was sort of similar to this. I think this one was the one I actually used most of the time for it. And I started dry brushing black Citadel Abaddon black right here over the silver work I done. Now here's the thing. You cannot be as liberal with this as you were the silver paint, because if you are, you're going to end up getting rid of all of your silver detailing. So I was very, very careful about how much of the black that I actually applied. It was very little, and I started getting a feel for avoiding these edges right here where I had applied so much silver and did all my detail work, and kind of just knocking down specific areas. I wanted to go over these lines right here and retain a lot of that detail that I punched up while still darkening the main panels. Trial and error, experimentation. What parts did I want to darken more than others? Where would the Batmobile have the most wear at? And it was just a matter of me going through and just kind of being selective about this and that and where it would be. I spent a lot of time on the front kind of head ram right here, the bat head, and made some decisions about where things would go. I particularly wanted there to be a large dent, an impression that it had really been messed up by something. The Joker had thrown a bomb out or something, so I wanted there to be that large dent to kind of make a statement that this Batmobile had been through some stuff. I also applied very little of it to some of these pipes on the sides because I feel like they should be kind of greased up a little bit. If these are vents that are doing like some kind of air intake, really, they should be taking in a whole lot of dirt and grime with that. So I was actually a little more liberal with how much paint was on the brush for this because I wanted some really strong stains. I made a darker area here, almost as if something had slammed right into this or if he had busted through something. And I wanted that same idea about most of the damage would be here because this is where everybody's trying to kill Batman. I wanted a lot of damage to follow through here, and you see how I'm streaking the paint as I go. And some of this was accomplished with the silvers, kind of running the brush down, just running it down the direction I wanted it to go. Some of it was accomplished with the black going back over the silver. I traced silver all around the eyes, of course, and then I filled in black. The motion that you're going to use is more of a dabbing. So you're dabbing the black on, and then you're running it this way because you want that same theory about everything, you know, going at high speed and going this way. And if you keep this up, it kind of gives like a motion to your paint. It kind of gives like a sort of like a high speed look. These lines sort of suggest movement. So that's what I wanted to do. I also made a choice up here on the canopy. Notice how there's very little on the back. I figured that hardly anything would be hitting the Batmobile at the back and everything would be hitting it from the front. That's why the edges are done out. That's why there's so much silver wear. And I imagine if Batman hit anything, it would glide over the top and just roll off the back because of the aerodynamic design of the car. So those were just some of my choices, some of my decision making. You will really start to see your Batmobile come together in this phase. And then I took an additional hour or two just kind of going through, adding more silver to some places where I felt like I had lost the silver, adding more black to some places where I felt like the Batmobile was getting too light. It is a really creative and rewarding give and take process to get it exactly where you want it to be. And you may be looking at this and thinking it's too dark. You may look at it and think it's too silvery. Well, that's fine because it is kind of your baby here. You sort of get it to be whatever you want it to be. And that's the fun of this one. You do get a lot of room to make this the way that you want it to be. I even took a little bit of the brown from just the basic acrylic paints and a little bit of the silver and very lightly, very gingerly added it over these wheels because I wanted it to look like Batman had kind of been going through some rough terrain. So for this last step, I wanted to make absolutely sure that all of my detail was locked in the exact way I wanted it. So a whole lot of my time was dedicated to making sure everything was just right. At that point, you're ready to lock things in. And when I say lock things in, I mean you're going to apply a clear coat. And there's no better clear coat when you're doing a project like this than the Rust-Oleum American Accents 2x Ultra Cover. And it's the matte clear. It's very important that you get matte clear for this project. I do not think the Batmobile should look shiny if it's going to be in kind of a weathered, beat up state. If you do a matte clear, you get a dull finish. And I think that that's really what you want for this kind of look. Take your time shaking this thing up. I shook it for a solid 2 or 3 minutes pretty vigorously to make sure it was well mixed, because if your propellant is not well mixed with the actual paint on the inside, or in this case the coating on the inside, then you're going to have some problems with tackiness. So I did that, took it out to my garage, opened a couple of doors, and you know, you might want to wear a mask, and I got it all shook up. I then took my painter's tape and I actually covered, and I just ripped it into almost like little triangles, and I ripped it up and applied it into the headlight area. Notice how I've not touched the headlights. You know why? I love the yellow headlights in the Batmobile. It gives it kind of a fun, cartoony, comic booky look. And I wanted these to stay as clean and as nice as they could, and I didn't want a matte coating to kind of ruin their sort of shiny decal look. Do you see that? How it catches the light right there. And I sprayed for probably about 10 seconds at a time over top of it. And then I went to the sides, did the same thing, and the same thing to the back. I then let that dry for probably about 20 minutes, and I went back and I did the exact same thing over again. And keep in mind, you're still going to have these transparent orange plastic bits out at this time. you do not want to spray that matte coating on those transparent plastic orange bits, because you want that canopy to stay nice and shiny, and so it looks like a kind of glass, just like the headlights. So once everything got dried, I was actually surprised at just how well this Rust-Oleum covered everything and coated it. You could actually, you know, run your hands all over this thing. There's nothing sticky about it. There's nothing that feels fragile about the paint job. It actually feels more like a mass market toy that has a coating sprayed over a factory paint job. Of course, when it's done drying, you'll just open the canopy back up and you'll take your Phillips head screwdriver and just screw these back in, and it will be just as good as new. I really believe, you know, usually when people say custom, well, you can't play with it. I really believe you could probably play with this. You could probably run it through like a drain and it would probably be fine. I have a feeling the paint would hold up, because this Rust-Oleum, I'm telling you, if you get 2 or 3 layers on there, and it is okay to go crazy with it, you know, heck, get 3 or 4 layers. It doesn't matter. The more you get on there, the more protected it will be. It dries really well. Give it some time. And that's how I made my Batmobile. I let that Rust-Oleum dry for probably a solid overnight before I really did too much in terms of posing and putting figures around it. And I was really satisfied with the results. So we should probably have a look at how this thing is going to look with some of your figures once you have it done. And here we have the Ascending Knight Batman. I think this is a really nice look. But in some ways, I feel like that this Batman kind of wouldn't have graduated to such an elaborate Batmobile just yet. In some ways, I sort of feel like that this Batman is still driving like a coupe or some kind of sports car, or maybe even something similar to what Robert Pattinson is driving in The Batman. Of course, all these Batman figures I'm showing do fit into the cockpit no problem, so it won't be an issue for you to put any of them in. We have the PX exclusive Sovereign Knight Batman. And I think that this looks pretty nice. The one thing I would say is that whenever Batman is in that kind of blue, I suppose I imagine in a way that the Batmobile sort of matches that blue. So you could essentially do the same process and match the blue with Sovereign Knight here. And you could spray it on. You could then apply the silver and then sort of dye it down with some black a little bit. Experiment, see what you like. This thing is only 20 bucks, so it's not like you're taking that big of a risk. Here's one that I really like the look of it with, and I kind of feel like aesthetically that when I was designing and when I was making my choices on this Batmobile, that I was sort of thinking of this. This is actually another slight custom project for me, and I have a video about this on the channel, and I really think that this is a nice match. I think that he looks like this is a Batmobile that he would actually go with. So I really do like the look of the Sovereign Knight Standard Edition with this particular Batmobile. Next up, we've got Sovereign Knight Onyx Edition, which was the MDX version of Sovereign Knight. And I really like this because it's already so much of an 89 Batmobile that this guy with the kind of 89 looking outfit really does go well with it. So I think it's very nice to see them side by side, and I think that it's definitely a nice match. Lastly, the only version I've got of this guy so far is the standard version. I have the other versions on order, but they're not out quite yet. Here we have the Supreme Knight Batman with this Batmobile. And I have to say that out of all of them, this one to me is straight up money with this Batmobile. I think it's because in my head, I've added so much damage and so much corrosion to the Batmobile that it would almost have to be a Batman who's at least in the last half of his career using this thing and kind of patching it up as he goes. So it is great to see this guy with him. I also like that because there's so much silver on the car and so much damage, that Batman's kind of lighter gray, almost that blue gray in his outfit, really brings out some of that. So it is really nice to see those together, and I do think that it's a pretty nice compliment. So I really love how this looks, and I'm definitely excited to have him displayed alongside of it. Guys, I surely hope that everyone has enjoyed this little tutorial here on the channel. I always love doing these little videos. I know that I'm not any kind of expert or any kind of super artist when it comes to these customs, but I always like to find simple and effective customs that I think our viewers would actually enjoy doing and not be so stressed out by and not spend a whole bunch of money on. So I hope that this is something that's really helped you out. If you want to see more of these quick little fun tutorials here on the channel that you can do in just a night or two, then please let me know in the comments below. I certainly have some other ideas for these things, and I would certainly love to share those with you. So just let me know in the comments below if you would like to see any more of these types of custom videos. So anyway, guys, I sure do thank you for watching today. And remember, we would really appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and hit that like button and leave a comment below. Let me tell you, every single sub means so much to the channel, and we are so close to hitting a major milestone with our subscriber count, and we want to do a special video for that. So please make sure that you hit that subscribe button and become a member of the Fanboys today, because once you do, you're family, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Till next time, it's been a privilege to make another video for you today. God bless you and yours. Be safe out there, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Take care.